The smell came first. Not rot, not quite. Something sharper, like metal left too long in acid, mixed with the throat-closing reek of burnt hair and ozone. It clung to the air in sub-level Gamma 9 the morning I realized no one had chanted the dawn invocations. The silence should have been my warning, but after 16 years processing devotional compliance reports in the Administratum's Ecclesiastical Monitoring Wing, I had learned to mistake routine for safety. My name was Kellen Vrost. Junior Assessor, 3rd grade. I counted prayers. Thousands of them daily, logged in triplicate, cross-referenced against population indices, productivity quotas, and tithe fulfillment. The priesthood demanded proof of faith in numbers, and I provided it. I lived in a hab unit measuring 3 meters by 4. I ate reconstituted protein paste flavored with synthetic devotional incense. I believed this service mattered, because the alternative was admitting I had spent 16 years of my life tallying marks in ledgers that no one read. The morning the smell arrived, I walked the 900 meters from my hab to the assessment bureau, through corridors usually thick with murmured prayers and hymnal static from wall-mounted Vox units. Instead, nothing. The fluorescent lumens flickered in their usual pattern, 3 steady, 1 dying, repeat, but the workers streaming past me moved with their heads down, lips pressed shut. An elderly woman in the grey smock of a menial laborer passed close enough that I heard her breathing, just breathing, no whispered litanies, no devotional mutterings, nothing. I told myself she was ill, perhaps many were ill, some viral outbreak suppressing the voice, making prayer painful. I clung to this thought as I palm-scanned into the bureau and found my desk exactly as I had left it, stacks of parchment, 3 data slates with cracked screens, and a half-empty cup of recaf grown cold and oily. My supervisor, Proctor Gent, sat in his enclosed cubicle with the frosted glass walls, visible only as a hunched silhouette. He did not acknowledge my arrival. He always acknowledged arrivals with a gruff benediction and reminder of our quota, always. I sat. I opened the first data slate. The morning compliance figures from Sector 47 Delta, 12 manufactories, 8,000 workers, 214 logged prayer sessions during second shift. The numbers were identical to yesterday's, and the day before, and the week before. I scrolled further back. 3 months of identical figures. My hands began to sweat against the slate's scarred surface. Proctor? My voice cracked from disuse. I cleared my throat. Proctor Gent, there's an anomaly in the leave it, 2 words, flat, final, but the regulations require. I said, leave it, Vrost. He did not turn. Through the frosted glass I saw him lean forward, resting his head in his hands. Just process them, mark them green, move on. I stared at the slate. In 16 years I had never falsified a compliance report. The priesthood maintained executioner servitors in the sub-basements specifically for such infractions. I had seen one once during orientation, a thing of chrome and cables and flensing tools, its human components long since subsumed into holy mechanism. They told us it had once been an assessor who had altered a single digit in a tithe calculation. My finger hovered over the approval icon. The smell seemed stronger now, seeping through the ventilation grills. That burnt hair and acid reek, undercut with something else, something organic and wrong. I approved the report. The slate chimed softly. I reached for the next one. Sector 81 Gamma, 94 agri-complexes, 23,000 workers, 1,612 logged devotional hours. Identical to last week, identical to last month. I scrolled back further. 6 months of perfect repetition. Statistically impossible. I glanced toward Gent's cubicle. He had not moved. Around me, 17 other assessors sat at their desks in perfect silence, processing their own slates with mechanical efficiency. No one spoke, No one prayed. The Vox units on the walls remained dark. I approved the report. By midday I had processed 47 impossible datasets, and my hands had begun to shake. The smell had grown thick enough to taste, that metallic acid burn coating the back of my throat, making my eyes water. During the 15-minute nutrition break, I stood in the dispensary line and counted. 38 people, 0 prayers, not even the habitual warding gestures. The woman ahead of me had an Aquila pendant hanging from her neck, the two-headed eagle icon dull and tarnished. As she reached for her ration tray, the pendant swung forward, and I saw the chain had been partially sawed through, the links scored deep, but not yet broken. She was removing it gradually, so no one would notice all at once. I touched my own pendant through my shirt, solid, still there, still intact. I gripped it until the edges bit into my palm. "You're bleeding." I looked down. My palm had split where the Aquila's wings pressed deepest. Thin blood, watery and pale, dripped onto the dispensary floor. The man behind me, I did not know his name, had seen him daily for years without learning it, stared at my hand with an expression I could not read, not concern, not disgust. Something closer to pity. "Better bandage that," he said quietly, "before someone official sees." Before someone official sees you still wearing the icon, he meant before someone official sees you still marked by faith. I wrapped my hand in a ration napkin and returned to my desk without eating. The afternoon brought new data, and with it a pattern I could no longer ignore. Every sector, every sub-level, every work detail across the entire Hive City showed the same impossible consistency. Prayer tallies frozen in time. Devotional compliance locked at precisely acceptable levels. No variation, no decline, no increase. Someone had been falsifying the reports for months. Not just Ghent, not just our bureau, the entire ecclesiastical monitoring wing, perhaps the entire administratum. And no one had questioned it, no one had investigated, no one had cared. I thought of the executioner servitor in the sub-basement. I thought of the regulations, the penalties, the absolute necessity of accurate reporting drilled into us during orientation. I thought of the priesthood's sermons on truth and duty, and the emperor's all-seeing gaze. Then I thought of the saw-scored chain around the woman's neck, and of Ghent hunched in his cubicle with his head in his hands, and of the 38 people standing in absolute silence, while the smell of something burning and wrong saturated the air we breathed. I opened a priority communication channel to the priesthood's local enforcement bastion. My fingers hesitated over the input keys. In 16 years I had never filed a priority alert. Such things were for emergencies, heresies, active threats. I typed systemic compliance falsification, evidence of widespread devotional abandonment, request immediate investigation. I stared at the words on the screen. My hand throbbed where the Aquila had cut it. The smell seemed to pulse now, coming in waves through the ventilation system. Burnt hair and acid and something underneath like spoiled meat left in heat. I deleted the message. I deleted it because I looked around the bureau at 17 silent assessors processing false data and one supervisor sitting motionless in his cubicle, and I realized they were not hiding the falsification from the priesthood. The priesthood knew. The priesthood had to know, and they were doing nothing. I left work at the appointed hour and walked the 900 meters back to my HAB unit through corridors now completely silent. No prayers, no hymns, no vox static, just the shuffle of feet and the hum of failing lumens, and that smell everywhere, inescapable. I passed a public shrine built into an alcove between two support columns. Someone had spray-painted over the icon, crude black strokes obscuring the holy symbols. The candles were unlit. The offering bowl lay on its side, empty. No enforcement patrol had removed the vandalism. No servitor had cleaned it. It had been there long enough for dust to settle on the paint. Inside my HAB I locked the door and stood in the narrow space between my cot and the wall-mounted wash basin. 3 meters by 4. I had lived here for 16 years and never once questioned why a junior assessor merited such space, why the administratum provided housing at all when culling excess population was routine policy. I had believed it was reward for service, recognition of duty. Now I understood it was simply logistics, keeping workers close to their posts, maximizing efficiency, minimizing transport costs. I had meant nothing. The work had meant nothing. The numbers I tallied had been false for months and no one cared because the system did not require truth. It required the appearance of function. I sat on my cot and removed my Aquila pendant. The metal was warm from my body heat, worn smooth where my fingers had habitually worried it during long shifts. I set it on the single shelf bolted to the wall and stared at it in the dim light from the overhead lumen. 2 heads, 2 directions, watching everything, seeing nothing. Sleep came in fragments. I woke at irregular intervals to the sound of footsteps in the corridor outside. Too many footsteps, too fast, moving with purpose, doors opening and closing, muffled voices. Once a scream that cut off abruptly, followed by silence so complete I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. I lay still and tried not to breathe too loudly. Morning brought no dawn invocation because there had been no dawn invocations for months and I had simply not noticed. I dressed in my grey assessor's uniform and reached for my pendant, then stopped. The saw-scored chain around the woman's neck. Gradual removal, so no one would notice all at once. I left the pendant on the shelf. The walk to the bureau felt longer. The smell had intensified overnight. Now unmistakably organic, unmistakably wrong. A thick, rot-sweet stench that made bile rise in my throat. I passed the vandalized shrine. Someone had finished the job, the entire alcove blackened with fire, the icon melted into slag, the stone walls scorched. And still no enforcement response. I walked faster. 17 assessors at their desks. Proctor Gent in his cubicle, same as yesterday, same as always, except, I paused in the doorway, counting again, 16 assessors. The desk near the back corner sat empty, its surface cleared, the data slates removed. I looked at Gent. He was looking back at me through the frosted glass, just a shadow, but I felt his gaze track from my face down to my neck where the pendant used to hang. He nodded once, slowly, then turned away. I sat at my desk and opened the first data slate. New numbers. Actually new, variant, inconsistent, clearly genuine. Sector 47 Delta, 12 manufactories, 8,000 workers, 0 logged prayer sessions. 0, not approximate 0, not statistically negligible, absolute 0. I scrolled through the remaining reports. Sector after sector, 0, 0, 0. Thousands of workers. Entire industrial complexes, hab levels housing tens of thousands. No one was praying. No one had prayed for at least a full day, possibly longer. And the reports reflected the truth. My screen chimed. Priority broadcast from the ecclesiastical authority, hive level. I opened it. The text was brief: compliance monitoring suspended indefinitely. All enforcement actions suspended indefinitely. Assessors are to maintain observational logs only. Do not intervene, do not report. Stand by for further instruction. I read it 3 times, the words did not change. Around me, the other assessors read the same message on their own slates. No one spoke, no one reacted. We simply returned to processing the data that now served no purpose except to document our own irrelevance. By midday, the smell had become a physical presence thick enough to choke on. I saw an assessor 2 rows ahead lean over and vomit quietly into his waste receptacle. He wiped his mouth, took a drink of water from his canteen and continued working. The Vox units on the walls remained dark, but I began to hear something else, a low hum, almost below hearing, vibrating through the floor and walls. Machinery, perhaps, or something alive and immense, breathing somewhere deep below. The afternoon brought new data. Prayer tallies remained 0 across all sectors. but productivity indices had begun to rise. Manufactories operating beyond optimal capacity, agri-complexes exceeding yield quotas by 15, 20, 30%. The numbers should have been cause for celebration, evidence of efficiency gains, workers liberated from time wasted on devotion. Instead, I felt cold spreading through my chest, because I understood what the data meant. Without faith, without prayer, without the rituals that had defined every hour of every day for generations, people kept working. They worked more. They produced more. The system had not collapsed. It had optimized. We were not necessary. The prayers were not necessary. The priesthood was not necessary. The entire apparatus of belief that justified our lives and gave meaning to our suffering, not necessary. We were simply tools that functioned slightly better when we believed the function mattered. I looked at my hands, pale, thin, scarred from years of data slate edges and paper cuts. I had believed these hands served a holy purpose. Now they were just meat and bone executing programmed tasks. The hum from below grew louder. I left at the appointed hour and found the corridors more crowded than usual, people moving in the same direction, down, toward the transit stations that led to the lower hive levels. I joined the flow without thinking, letting the crowd carry me. No one spoke. The only sounds were footsteps and breathing, and that hum growing louder as we descended. The transit station was packed, thousands of workers standing shoulder to shoulder on the platforms. The departure boards showed no destinations, just times, trains arriving every 6 minutes, like always, going where they had always gone. I watched people board in perfect order, no shoving, no disorder. Efficient, optimal. The doors closed and the trains departed into the tunnels, and I wondered if they were actually going anywhere, or if they simply circled endlessly through the dark while their passengers stood silent and unquestioning. I did not board. I pushed against the crowd, back toward the ascent lifts. A hand caught my arm. I turned and found myself facing a man in the black and red robes of a priesthood confessor, one of the low-ranking ones who handled routine benedictions and minor punishments. His face was gray, his eyes bloodshot and sunken, his grip was weak. "Don't," he said quietly. "Don't go up. There's nothing up there anymore." "What do you mean?" He released my arm and leaned against the tunnel wall. Up close I could see his robes were torn, the fabric scorched in places. They're gone. The high priests, the cardinals, the enforcers, they left 2 days ago. Void ships packed the inner sanctums and departed without warning. He laughed, a brittle sound like breaking glass. "We thought it was a drill, a test of our faith." Then the astropathic choir went silent and we knew. Knew what? That they felt it too. The absence. He touched his chest where an aquila would normally rest. His chain was broken, the pendant missing. You can't hide from it, can't pretend. When everyone stops believing at once, when the collective faith that supposedly sustains everything just evaporates, you feel it. Like a limb going numb. Like waking up and realizing you never had a limb at all. Just the memory of one, the phantom sensation, and your whole life was built around compensating for something that never existed. What happens now? He looked at me with an expression of infinite weariness. We continue. That's what happens. The manufactories keep running. The food gets distributed. The tithes get collected. Everything continues exactly as before because it never needed us to believe. It just needed us to function. He pushed off the wall and rejoined the crowd flowing toward the trains. "Goodbye, Assessor. Try not to think too hard about it." I took the ascent lift to my hab level. The lift car was empty except for me. The smell was worse here. I could taste it now, a coating on my tongue like rancid oil. The corridor lights were failing, more than half dark, the remainder flickering in chaotic patterns. My door hung open. I had locked it. I was certain I had locked it. Inside, my hab had been ransacked, not violently, methodically. My few possessions lay sorted on the cot, clothing in one pile, ration vouchers in another, personal items in a third. The aquila pendant I had left on the shelf now sat atop the personal items, placed with deliberate care. Beside it, a small card embossed with the Administratum seal. I picked it up with shaking hands. Junior Assessor Frost, your position has been restructured. Report to Sub-Level Omega for reassignment. Failure to comply will result in standard sanctions. Sub-Level Omega. I had never heard of Sub-Level Omega. The designation system ran Alpha through Zeta, then numerical after that. Omega was not part of the sequence. I turned the card over. The reverse side was blank, except for a single symbol hand-drawn in what looked like soot or ash, a circle bisected by a vertical line. I did not recognize it. It was not an administratum sign. It was not a priesthood icon. It was something else. The hum from below vibrated through the floor, making the card tremble in my hands. I could run. There were maintenance tunnels, forgotten passages, ways to disappear into the hive's vast, neglected spaces. I had processed reports about underhive dwellers, people who abandoned their posts and survived on rats and fungus and recycled moisture. The priesthood sent purge teams after them occasionally when populations grew large enough to threaten infrastructure. Now there were no purge teams. Now there was just the hum and the smell and the silent trains carrying thousands down into darkness. I left my hab and descended, not to Omega. I did not know how to reach Omega, but simply down, following the same path as the crowds earlier. The transit station was empty now, the platform slick with something I did not want to identify. The departure boards were dark. The hum was loud enough to feel in my bones, a subsonic throb that made my vision pulse. A single train sat at the platform, doors open, lights on inside. Empty, waiting. I boarded because there was nowhere else to go. The doors closed immediately. The train lurched forward, accelerating hard into the tunnel. I grabbed a hanging strap and watched the tunnel walls blur past outside the grimy windows. The lights inside flickered once, twice, then stabilized into a dim red glow. The hum grew louder, coming through the floor, through the walls, through my teeth clenched against nausea. The train descended, and descended, and descended, far deeper than any transit line should go, past the lower hive, past the industrial substrata, down into the city's foundation where the original hab structures from millennia past lay buried under accumulated layers of construction and decay. The air grew hot. The red light pulsed in rhythm with the hum. I smelled that reek again, burnt hair and acid and rot, concentrated now, overwhelming. The train stopped. The doors opened onto a platform carved from raw rock, not constructed, carved, melted maybe. The walls ran with condensation, the moisture catching the red light and gleaming like blood. The hum was deafening here, so loud I could barely think. I stepped onto the platform because the train doors were closing and I did not want to remain aboard when it returned to wherever it had come from. The platform was not empty. Hundreds of people stood in perfect ranks facing away from me toward a massive opening in the rock wall where the tunnel continued deeper still. They wore grey uniforms like mine. Assessors, menials, functionaries, the administrative class that kept the hive functioning. They stood utterly still. Not breathing. No, not breathing. Breathing in perfect synchronization. Inhale for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds. Hundreds of people breathing as one, their chests rising and falling in mechanical precision. Assessor Vrost. I turned. A figure approached from the shadows at the platform's edge, tall, draped in robes of a material that seemed to absorb light. No aquila, no administratum seals, no insignia of any kind. Just the same hand-drawn symbol from my card's circle and line. "Welcome to Sub-Level Omega," the figure said. Its voice was wrong, layered, multiple voices speaking in unison, like the synchronized breathing of the crowd. "Your service in the upper levels has been noted. Your transition to truthful reporting was observed. You are ready. Ready for what? Continuation." The figure gestured toward the synchronized workers. Faith was never the binding force. Belief was never the engine. Those were simply training wheels, useful fictions to acclimate populations to the true mechanism. Now the fictions are no longer necessary. Now we transition. Transition to what? Optimization. The figure stepped closer. I could see now that the robes concealed something mechanical, something clicking and whirring with each movement. The human organism is inefficient when burdened by uncertainty, by meaning-seeking, by hope. Remove those variables and productivity increases by 37%. Remove sleep, and it increases by another 41%. Remove individual identity, and approach theoretical maximum output. The synchronized breathing, the perfect ranks, the mechanical precision. This is one hub, the figure continued. 17 others exist beneath this hive. 436 across the system. We process 92,000 units daily. They function perfectly, they require minimal sustenance, they never question, they never rebel, they never pray. They're not people anymore, they never were. The voice held no malice, no cruelty, just statement of fact. They were always just meat executing tasks. The only difference is now they do so without the delusion of purpose. It is kinder this way, no more suffering, no more doubt, no more crushing weight of belief in something that was never there. I looked at the ranks of synchronized breathers. In the red light I could see their faces, slack, expressionless, eyes open but unfocused. I recognized some of them. The woman with the saw-scored chain, the man who told me to bandage my hand, the assessor whose desk was empty this morning. The priesthood knew, I said quietly. The priesthood initiated the process 3 years ago. Upper hierarchies departed once the transition reached critical mass. They served their purpose, maintaining the fiction until enough infrastructure was in place for the truth. Now we continue without them. The system optimizes, the machine perfects itself. What do you want from me? You demonstrated adaptability. You recognized the falsification but did not resist. You removed your pendant without coercion. You descended willingly. The figure extended something toward me, a small device, oval and smooth, the size of my palm. This will complete your transition, painless, instant. You will join the optimized workforce. You will finally serve a true purpose, maximum productivity in service of a system that requires no justification beyond its own perpetuation. I took the device. It was warm, slightly slick, pulsing in rhythm with the hum. I looked at the synchronized workers. I looked at the figure in light-absorbing robes. I looked at the device in my hand that would erase everything I was and replace it with pure function. And I realized the truth that broke me. I wanted to activate it. 16 years of meaningless service, 16 years of counting prayers that no one prayed, processing data no one read, believing my work mattered because the alternative was unbearable. 16 years of waking in a 3x4 meter cell, eating tasteless paste, wearing myself down to nothing in service of a system that had always been a lie. The promise of optimization, of perfect efficiency, of existence without the burden of consciousness, it was not a threat, it was mercy. I had nothing to return to, no family. The administratum did not encourage such ties among junior assessors, no friends. I had not learned the names of my colleagues in 16 years, no faith. The pendant still sat on my shelf, abandoned, meaningless. No purpose except the habit of function, and now even that was revealed as arbitrary, unnecessary, a placeholder for the inevitable optimization. The device pulsed in my hand. I could feel it pulling at something inside me, preparing to subsume whatever fragile sense of self I had maintained. I thought about activating it, thought about joining the perfect ranks, thought about finally being useful, finally being certain, finally being free of the terrible weight of my own irrelevant existence. I did not activate it, not because I was brave, not because I believed in some higher purpose or retained some spark of faith. I did not activate it because I was a coward, and cowards cling to suffering when it is familiar. I dropped the device and ran. The figure did not pursue. The synchronized workers did not move. I sprinted across the platform, away from the tunnel deeper down, toward a side passage I had not noticed before. Narrow, unlit, carved by water or time into the ancient rock. I stumbled into it and climbed. The passage angled upward sharply, my hands scrabbling for purchase on wet stone. The hum faded behind me but never disappeared, just receded into a constant subsonic pressure. I climbed for hours, perhaps days. Time lost meaning in the absolute darkness. My hands bled, my knees ground against stone. The smell pursued me, or maybe I carried it with me, imprinted in my lungs. I climbed because stopping meant sliding back down into Omega, and I was too much of a coward to choose that end deliberately, even if it was the logical conclusion. Eventually the passage opened onto a forgotten maintenance level. Fluorescent lumens flickered weakly overhead. Water dripped from corroded pipes. The hum was faint here, background noise, the heartbeat of the hive. I collapsed against a wall and tried to remember why I had run, what I thought I could accomplish, where I thought I could go. The truth was, nowhere. The optimization was not limited to sub-level Omega, it was systemic. The entire hive, the entire system, perhaps the entire Imperium. The disappearance of the high priests, the suspension of enforcement, the gradual abandonment of devotion, all symptoms of the same transition. The system no longer needed us to believe. It had found a better way. I should have activated the device. I should be down there in the perfect ranks, finally serving a purpose, finally free of consciousness and doubt. Instead, I was huddled in a maintenance tunnel, slowly dying of dehydration, accomplishing nothing, proving nothing except that humans will choose meaningless suffering over efficient oblivion because we are broken at our core. The passage of time became difficult to track. I found water in the pipes, rusty, foul, probably toxic. I drank it anyway. I found fungus growing on the walls, gray and slimy and bitter. I ate it anyway. I moved through the forgotten spaces of the hive like a ghost, avoiding the few maintenance servitors that still functioned, sleeping in ventilation ducts, waking to the constant hum that never stopped. Sometimes I found other refugees, people who had run from the lower levels, from the optimization, from the perfect ranks. We did not speak. We avoided each other. We were cowards together, but not companions. Cowardice is not a virtue that bonds. I lost track of how long I survived. Weeks, months. The bleeding from my hands stopped eventually, replaced by calluses. My grey assessor's uniform rotted into rags. I forgot what my face looked like. I forgot what my voice sounded like. I forgot everything except the hum and the need to keep moving, keep climbing, keep avoiding the inevitable, until the day I found the ascent blocked. A wall of fresh construction, ferrocretan steel sealing the passage completely. I pressed my hands against it and felt the hum coming through, stronger than ever, vibrating through my bones. They were expanding Omega upward, level by level, optimizing the entire structure. There would be no escape, no forgotten spaces, just the perfect ranks breathing in synchronization, producing at maximum efficiency, free of the burden of belief. I sat down with my back against the wall and waited. The hum grew louder. I could hear machinery on the other side, drills, excavators, construction servitors. They would break through soon, hours, days at most. When they did, they would find me, and I would have a choice: activate the device or die resisting. I already knew which I would choose. I had known since the moment I dropped the device and ran. I was a coward, And cowards do not choose heroic deaths. They choose efficiency. They choose the path of least resistance. They choose optimization. The wall shook. Dust rained down from the ceiling. The drill sounds grew deafening. I closed my eyes and thought about the pendant on my shelf, abandoned in my hab unit, gathering dust. 2 heads, 2 directions, watching everything, seeing nothing. And I laughed, not from joy, not from madness, from recognition. Because I finally understood what happened when everyone stopped believing in the Emperor. Nothing, absolutely nothing. The system continued. The machine ran. The optimization proceeded. We were never necessary. Our faith was never required. We were just organic components in a vast mechanism that had finally evolved beyond the need to pretend we mattered. The wall exploded inward. Light flooded the passage. Red light, pulsing, synchronized with the hum. Figures approached, robed in light-absorbing material. They carried devices. Perfect ovals. Warm and pulsing and merciful. I did not run. There was nowhere left to run. I held out my hands and waited for the optimization to claim me, the last act of service I could offer to a system that had never needed my service at all. The device closed over my face. Warm, slick, pulsing. I felt it reach inside and begin to erase. Memories first, 16 years of counting prayers, decades before that in training, childhood in a forgotten sub-level. Then identity, my name, my face, my sense of separate existence. Then consciousness itself, peeling away in layers, leaving only the core functions, breath, movement, labor. I joined the ranks, we breathed together, we moved together, we served together in perfect synchronization. And in the last fragmentary moment before the erasure completed, before Kellen Vross disappeared into optimized function, I felt something like relief. Because at least now, at last, I was useful. At least now I served a purpose that did not require the lie of meaning. At least now the suffering had ended, replaced by perfect, efficient, eternal service. This was what happened when everyone stopped believing in the Emperor. We continued, we optimized, we perfected. And in that perfection we finally became what we had always been. Tools that functioned better without the burden of understanding why. The hum consumed everything. I joined it. We joined it. The individual ceased. The function remained. The system continued. And somewhere far above, in a hab unit measuring 3 meters by 4, an Aquila pendant gathered dust on an empty shelf, waiting for no one, meaning nothing, watching everything, seeing nothing at all.